Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you all here again today on our spring is here, but yet cloudy and rainy kind of day. It's lovely to see you back. How's everybody doing today? 1 to 7, crappy to happy. Where are you today? 5. 5. Ooh, Greta's a 6. 5. 5. I'm a 7. Yep. Oh, 6. Good. Great. Welcome, Megan. Welcome, Kelly. So was there something left over from last week that we were going to start with? I can't remember. Anyway, well, does anybody have anything for the group or anything you'd like to ask or share? Miss Greta?
Oh, I have a question, and it has to do with a topic. So a topic that you would hit on in Peer Ed. I wonder if you guys have resources or where do you go when this gets brought up in your class? And it is a 3 to 4-year-old who's starting to sneak things, maybe even steal things, and is getting and lying about whether they did it or not. I'm wondering where you guys go with that. I have a grandma who does daycare who lives in the house and is really the childcare provider during regular business hour days all week. And this is starting to happen. She goes, I know it could be a stage. I know that she's 3 going into 4, but I don't want to do this. And so I'm trying to look for like just a couple of tips, tricks, kind of things or whatever that I could
What's he sneaking, Greta?
Her Candy.
Oh, Candy. Okay.
At the dollar store yesterday, she did take something off a shelf and put it in her pocket. And grandma asked her if she had money to pay for it. So she's got some really great skills. But I just kind of like, where do you couch it in your Peer Ed? Where do you couch this? Because I don't really have a lesson on it. So then it ends up just kind of like, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? And then I feel like, well, did I have anything great there or not? And so I'm just curious.
For the food sneaking, my own children do this. I mean, the Easter baskets are over here, right? But anyway, I always talk about kids will always sneak food if they feel like they don't get enough access to it. So just offer a snack, offer that treat every meal or every dinner. Just put it on the plate. Feeding Littles will say, don't hold dessert up on this pedestal because then it becomes this coveted thing that they have to sneak. Whereas if it's just part of the meal, yep, we're gonna have that.
Yeah.
Then it's just food. It's not like this food. So I've had a lot of parents say that their child stopped, begging for food, sneaking food, when that special food was just part of the meal. And then also to put I can't believe how often parents are like, my child goes and sneaks candy. I'm like, well, I guarantee there's a place in your home where you can put it where they're not going to get it. Like you have to put it somewhere, like put it in a box, like put it in a cereal box that they're not going to be interested in, or, so you got to hide it a little bit better. I had a mom who said she hid it in her rolled oats container. So she knew where it was, but the kiddos had no idea where it was. So sometimes you got to get a little creative and not just put it like in a cabinet because they're smart. They'll go get it. But
I like that rolled oats idea because it's got that nice plastic cover.
And you can just,
and it really stamps down and really comes off. I like it.
Yep. So that's how I've dealt with food. And a lot of families have said once they started just giving that coveted candy at dinner, their kiddos stopped sneaking.
I like that.
I think the food is a really challenging one because of the issues that kids can then develop with their relationship with food as they get older. I know, speaking personally, that like I cannot remember a time in my childhood when I didn't sneak food. Like it started so early, and I can remember when I was 3. It started so early that I can't remember not doing it. And so this was like a big trigger for me when I saw my kids start to sometimes sneak food. I was like, no, we can't go down this road, right? It still happens some, but one of the things that we do is really talk about like this whole snack cabinet, that's okay, that's accessible. But when I hear them getting stuff and I can tell that they don't want me to hear that they're getting stuff, I'm like, hey, what you getting? And they'll usually respond. And what I try to focus on in my conversations with them is just like, can you always ask, just so I know what's going on? Like, how often do I say no? And we talk about that. It's like, I usually only say no if we're having supper in half an hour or something, right? Like it's just like, sometimes the answer is no, but I almost always say yes. It's better to just like, hey, mom, I'm going to grab a granola bar. Okay. You got it. Or, that kind of thing, so that there isn't any shame or hiding or anything like that around food. If you're hungry, I want you to eat. I want you to trust your body, listen to your body, and not have this whole added layer of the sneaky behavior, which sometimes I think, especially for my oldest, was more of the thrill than anything else. What can I get away with? Like, there's all this other stuff going on that had nothing to do with food. So we tried to focus on like, just ask. I almost always say yes. And if I don't, it's for a really good reason. And the answer will probably be yes next time. So that's a food thing. One lesson I have done, and I would have to go look for my lesson on what resources I used, has been about lying with little kids. And how we think of lying with adults is not the same as how children think of lying developmentally. And talking about, how have I described it? Lying as telling the truth they wish was. That's often what's going on with little ones, is that they're telling you what they think they're supposed to say, or what they think you want to hear, or what they wish was the answer, even if it's not. And it's not necessarily the same as an adult lying. So when adults take it as the same thing as an adult lying, it can be harder to have a little mercy and teaching and flexibility in their responses.
I do like bringing up, at this age, the idea of imagination and storytelling, and all of that feeds into this. And this idea of, if we have, I use the word forbidden fruit, any one of us has this little, whatever that looks like for the child, whatever their currency is. That goes along with that, Becca, really well. That idea of storytelling, telling the truth that I wish was. I love that. That's really, really good. I said that this week. I wish that was this way. Those are great. Yeah.
I'll add one thing, and I think it's important to talk about all of the food things, because the lie actually has to do with food. And so I appreciate that that's where the conversation started. But I also think about, how is it that our kids get to practice perspective taking and lying, literally? And not that we want to enforce lying, right? We all as parents need to address what that really is. But I put in the chat too some information that I share with families. We talk about like Piaget's mountain task and the, just perspective taking and the false belief tests. And I'll actually show a video of some of the false belief tests, because they're kind of in awe of like, oh, really? It's like, yeah, really? It takes time to develop to reach this place developmentally. And so while the lying is super, super frustrating and we do have to navigate it, it actually is also a fantastic developmental milestone, in that it does have to do with perspective taking, which they did not have a year prior.
Yeah.
And so to help the families realize that while it's not okay, it is developmentally appropriate. And so then going into, so how are we going to navigate it, right? What are those tips and tricks and tools and strategies? Like, Greta, yeah, that's where you started. But I like to give a little bit of that foundation to let them know, like, way to go, kiddo. Like, you are showing us that you are at this place in development, and you are definitely posing a challenge, a new one, right?
Yeah, thank you. No, that's good. That's exactly what I was looking for. All of it. All of what you just guys gave was perfect. And if anybody else has it's nice to have a little something outside of the conversation going on that you can point to. And so thanks, Nikki and Ellen. It looks like Susan just put something up too. So thank you. It's always nice to have a little something to point to.
Well, Susan's
Greta,
unmuting. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so I know that you have this wonderful grandparents group. Are these custodial grandparents?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So how about the conversation with the parents? Have they talked to the parents about this?
Yeah, they're working on that. How's that? There is conversation going on. So the beautiful part about this story is that this family, dad is a principal and mom does works with oh, I just lost it. They do the testing for the spectrum down in the cities. What's the organization? Just thinking of it. We always say
Fraser.
Fraser. Yep, she's a psychologist from Fraser. So those are the parents. So there's a lot of conversation, probably more conversation going on there. So she's like looking for practical. She's like wanting this grandma specifically. She's wonderful. But anyway, but that is something she was talking about, is being a grandparent in this situation, and what is my role? And I don't really want to do this, but I am the one. She even said, in a daycare situation, the daycare provider would like, if the child is taking from her home, she would, something in during the day, in the moment, she would address it, but she wouldn't feel this responsibility overarching to this family that she does because she's grandma as well. It was an interesting conversation to be had. That's good.
Greta, it's interesting. I have a parent just last week. She shared her son stole something and just really threw the mom and dad, in a very bad place. So, we discussed that last week. So many times it could be when you talk about how we can help the grandma, right, grandparent. So sometimes we can maybe help the parents think this is an opportunity to teach the child, because many times children they don't have the concept of stealing or not. So what they are doing is trying to figure out what works for her. She wanted the candy, and what way can work for her, right? So and she doesn't have this strict concept of stealing or something. So she's just trying to explore possible ways to so thank you for bringing this up. This is very great. I wonder, Susan, if you could post the chat record today, and I think these resources are very good for what we are discussing today.
It was interesting in the conversation because around the table, other parents were chiming in, and they were talking about, they have some older ones and some younger ones. And they said, it is just hard though, when you start seeing, it's not just I'm going when mom's not looking and I'm going to grab something, but it's, or whatever. There's this time where it turns into sneaky, like there's like a strategy as how I'm going to do this. And it feels much more understood, the concept of, and there's like kind of feeling that out. And that's, I suppose, the artistry again, right? Of parenting. And then we talked about temperaments, about how some are going to be much more inclined to go that direction, and some might not ever try it. They might just, their temperament doesn't lead them that direction as much, or they do for a little bit, and then it's more like a phase, like grandma's hoping this is a phase. Anyway, it's just a fascinating, I was inspired kind of today. It was kind of fun to have a conversation around it and not be prepared. Anyway, thanks for your help on that.
I'm curious if any of you do a whole week, particularly with your toddler classes, on autism. I've never really done it as a standalone topic before. Okay, shaking your heads. I always have my speech pathologist come in and talk about language development. He's been a speech therapist for 30 years. He's so good at this and he loves coming, but he'll go and he'll be like, I'm going to talk about speech and development. And we're going to talk about receptive language and oral, all that language. And so he goes around to each parent and finds out, like, what is your child doing? And then he wraps it. He's so good at it. Right. And this year he had a college student shadowing him, and she came along, and afterwards she's like, he's like, how'd I do? What'd you think? Like, tell me if anything's outdated. And she said, well, I think you should throw a little thing in this about autism, because a lot of our earliest autism kiddos are the ones who aren't talking. And he was like, oh yeah, I'll totally do that. So he came to 3 of my toddler classes, all 3 of them. And he didn't do it on Monday, but he did it on Tuesday in my Thursday class. And he did a great job. And I have 2 kiddos in my Thursday toddler class that we're pretty worried about. Mom is ready to go with baby number 2 any minute. And we're like, okay, we're not going to tell her right now that we're worried about him. Right. But he gave me the handout from the First Words Project on early signs of autism. Yep, that's the one. And all of my parents took it. But this guy, oh my gosh, you guys, I've got this little guy, and he's in the middle of the circle, and he's got his tray, and all he does for the whole hour is just look at those wheels. So I'm just curious what your odds, and he did such a good job. Like, autism is, like we're better at diagnosing it. We know now there's a spectrum. We know now, like the way he talked about it was really, really good. And I think I've always avoided it because I'm afraid I'm going to scare parents. But I think now it's time to stop beating around the bush and just have a week of it. So I would love if you have really good autism resources that aren't scary, particularly for the toddler age. What do you got? And yeah.
16 by 16 is one of their articles that,
yes, I've
okay,
got
so
that
Autism
too.
Navigator.
Yep.
16 by 16. Social
Yeah, 16.
communication. I love talking about social
Yes.
communication, especially with the toddlers. The back and forth, this, the serve and return is part of it, but it's the 16
Yep.
by 16 months. That's 16 gestures. They have 16 actions, 16 gestures.
Actions with objects and gestures.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I just love approaching it as social. I don't even touch on that it comes from Autism Navigator. I don't even say this comes from Autism Navigator. I just say, hey, look at this social communication.
Yeah.
And if they see it, they see it. Maybe that's not the right way. Nikki, you probably have a better way. But
Not a better way, an additional way.
An additional way. So
An additional way. I use, we get it free in the Twin Cities, and I think it depends on the region that you're in, but I know it's available to everybody, and you can certainly download it for free, but it plays well with others. And it's the booklet that is free through Help Me Grow. And so I can put a link to it because I have it. I'll put it in the chat, but I have it in my Google Docs. But if you can get it for free, I order them in packs of like 25 or 50, and I will order 500 of them every school year. And I use it with every single class.
Wonderful.
And plays well with others. It starts at 6 months, and then it's every year. So it's ages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it's telling you 3 things: what typical development looks like by way of social, emotional, what social development looks like at that age, what we can do to foster it, and what might be red flags. And so it's not mentioning autism, but it's Help Me Grow's resource. And of course, we know why Help Me Grow puts all of those into the community, is so that we can find our kiddos and offer early intervention. So I'm going to find it in my Google Docs, and I will put the link, but you're going to be able to Google it and find it on the Help Me Grow website.
I've seen it. Those are nice. Those are really nice. If anyone is interested, for free, you can get training in early detection for autism through Autism Navigator. They do, through Florida State University. They just put it out. You can get their emails, and that's when they put it out. They put it out for different things, so you can get training on that if you're interested. And they do a really nice job. I thought. I haven't had anything else like it, so I don't know how to compare it to, but I thought it was very informative. My early childhood special ed team told me, as early childhood screener, as the screening coordinator, they said, Greta, we think that would be great for you to do it, so that when you're screening, if you can see early signs and stuff, and it's free. You can just go out and do that.
That's awesome.
If you're interested in all your spare time.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Nikki. Yeah. And I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to put this in the fall. I have this plays well with others. Oh, for sure. I've got a stack of these at my desk. I just looked at it and I was like, sometimes you just like, resource overload. I can't even look at it. But I think I'm going to put this in the fall. I think I'm gonna be like, after I talk about development, and I don't really do a whole week on fit. I just do like brain and then tantrums. And then I think I'm gonna do a whole week on autism. I'm just done beating around the bush. And the problem is that, we've had like my speech pathologist handed out this stuff. We looked at it, and these parents are like, oh, he's so smart. And I'm like, oh God, no, he's trying to empty cabinets instead of playing with toys. You know what I mean? He's trying to figure out how to turn on the water constant, like the entire class. So anyway, thanks.
So I'll just throw out there a personal experience of that underscores the value, I think, of talking about this in your classes. And that is from the perspective of a parent who did not have a child on the spectrum, and yet had a direct coaching encounter. So I used to do destination imagination coaching with my daughter when she was growing up. And one of the years, I think she might've been 7 or 8, there was a boy who was on the team who clearly, but this was 20 years ago, right? And we didn't have the words for it. And his mom, was always very protective, assertive, whatever. And yet it was just me and these like 7 elementary age kids. And and I think there should be way more on human development for adults that are coaching kids as it is, because your kid, but anyway. And it was a real challenge because, of course, me being me, I wanted all the kids to feel supported and all of that, and for them to work cooperatively and collaboratively and all of that, because that's what the challenges were and things like that. But it was tough. And I always felt at a loss, and I honestly think that if earlier on, if I had been in an ECFE class, but that wouldn't have been possible because I lived in Maryland and ECFE isn't available there. But if I had, it would have raised my awareness. It would have given me some confidence, and it would have helped me know, I think, even a few years later, when, I was in the same situation, and this wasn't just DI, it could have been coaching, it could have been softball, whatever, right? Yeah, I think it would be super, super helpful beyond just the parents alone. And then also from adult to adult, we could, parents can just be that much more supportive. And so I would completely back that up.
And it's not only kids that have autism. We probably have parents that have autism in our classes and we just don't even know it. My 19-year-old has autism, and I think it's tricky because we think of the doesn't talk, does repetitive behavior, and yes, those are true, but my son passed screening with flying colors. In toddler class, he had all the other parents scared that their kids weren't talking enough because he talked so much. He was that autistic kid. And if we kind of over focus on those sort of super stereotypical things, we're missing a lot for one thing. And I don't know. Yeah. And then, to just have that broader, we don't just have 4-year-olds with autism. We've got adults with autism and a wide variety of neurodivergent, people. And how do we talk about it? It's not a tragedy. It's, anyway.
Yeah, I just want to pipe in with the same exact thing. My 13-year-old, when he was 2, the red flag went up because he wasn't talking. And so we got him evaluated and had the early childhood evaluator from Help Me Grow specifically say, if you were worried about autism, don't. Because he wasn't your typical autistic kid. And yeah, he had the speech red flag, but he totally did eye contact. He was very socially engaged. He wanted adults to understand. And it wasn't until he was 7 with Frazier that we got the official autism diagnosis. It's oh my gosh, how much help could we have had in that interim period? And so I say it as a joke, but also as something that's so important to keep in mind is one autistic kid, one autistic kid, because that spectrum is not linear. It's it's got all these things going in different directions with different skill sets and strengths and challenges. just like any kid, right? And so I love the idea of setting a week aside, but I can tell you that if it was me, and I'm thinking about doing this next year because I love this idea, I really think I would focus on like having brain development and focusing on typical brain development and atypical development or neurodivergent. And I would include more than autism in that, because there's ADHD, there's sensory processing disorder. I have kiddos who have different things and really overlapping symptoms. And so just that, and I think it can be so helpful for parents, just like Susan was saying, to have this idea of be like, yeah, your kid might be in this typical development, and most kids are, but there's also a whole lot of kids who don't fall in that for different reasons. And if you can understand that, understanding is the first step towards having empathy and grace, right? And it helps you figure out how to interact with kids who are different than your child. And your kid's going to maybe have a friend or a classmate or whatever. And it gives you that a little bit more understanding of some brains work differently or develop in a different way. Yeah. So I just wanted to piggyback on Chris, that like, don't keep it super stereotypical, but broaden that idea of like, we develop in different ways.
And keeping it all light, like not light, but just saying like a neurodivergent kid these kids can have amazing like skills and abilities, and and I think it's getting better, but I think a lot of parents hear the word autism and they're just like, oh my God, my kid's gonna be like me. Yeah, and it's just not the case.
Doesn't have to be.
No.
And I didn't realize I had ADHD until I was 30. And it's ridiculous because in hindsight, it's just like, how could not every single person who interacted with me in my childhood not have known I had ADHD, right? But I was a girl and presented differently and blah, blah, blah. But it was as an adult I found out because I went to a nanny conference that talked about ADHD in kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm checking every box, right? So like also was already mentioned, adults realizing their brains may not have developed super typically, and that's okay. I think that can really lighten the fear of diagnosis as well.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you're going to talk about autism, I think the way we think about it and talk about it is a lot different, even in the last 5, maybe 10 years. So going out there and looking at how do adults with autism want to talk about autism, and just kind of being aware of that too. Like they don't like the puzzle piece, and Autism Speaks isn't a good place. And just kind of being aware of some of that stuff that I think a lot of families maybe don't necessarily. So
Thanks, you guys. This is great.
Yeah, thank you, Becca and Krista, for sharing, because you have a gift of sorts, right? Because you've walked through some stuff that some of us have not, and it's really, really important for us to hear your voices. So thank you for sharing. It's a great perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to echo Becca's sentiment about kind of widening the conversation, and because it's important, and it certainly has grown in importance, but I mean, grown in importance, almost like we have researchers at the university that bring in lots and lots and lots of dollars and are studying the spectrum and, things like that. And yet I almost think that it also kind of puts certain kids in a box, and it makes them like a group. But if you see your child as part of all children, and if because it's frustrating for a lot of parents, right? That if you do have, like, if there's tendencies in the family, you're not sure what's going on, and I'm talking things like ADHD or other things, right? Is like, and then there's this whole thing just labeling on autism, right? Then it's just like, okay, well, now that's frustrating because that's certainly not my child, right? Or I don't know if that's my child. So now I'm really, but if it's a much wider conversation, about brain development, and then sort of, is then you see all children, and you see a place for your child while you're still on this journey to figure out how best to support your child. So yeah, I like that idea.
Just had this thought too, that like in connection to Ellen, you were talking about the speech pathologist that you've worked with for many, many years. I think it would be really great if we create lesson plans like this and then to share them with our OTs and our PTs and our speech paths, to have them edit and add and just have to hear what they and how they would present material. Because I'm sure they each have a piece that they might offer up. Collaboration might be nice.
And then share it with the other PEs too.
We did a couple summers ago when we were doing summer programming. We had PT, OT, speech, general therapists come in for our summer sessions. That's what we've had. We hit all the topics over a 4-week session, or like a 4-month or 4-week over the month or something like that. That was really, really cool to have a variety and have, because they do have nuances even within themselves, what they like to talk about. So it's kind of nice to get, a variety as well. I mean, something that maybe in the future people want to do.
April is OT month, so something to think about. You could have your OTs come in April.
It's also autism awareness, isn't it, or something this month?
Yeah, there's a month for everything, isn't there?
There's a day for everything. I mean, really.
Hey, is there a Parenting Educators Appreciation Day?
No, but there should be.
Month, year, decade, millennium?
You mean like people who know that we're here?
Really? Welcome, Sarah. Your timing is perfect.
Ooh, what are we talking about?
Appreciating a parenting educator. Yeah, no, I'm curious. Again, I'm just always so inspired listening to you. So do a lot of you, all of you, bring in related professionals to talk to your groups? Like, honestly, this is the first time I've heard of UCFE bringing in like OTs and PTs. I've always heard like the sexuality educators and, health, fire, and safety people, kind of stuff. People specifically talking about, say, brain development or on, neurotypical development, atypical development, whatever. But moving into PT and OT, I think is wonderful. What other kind of perfect, and the reason why, and again, speaking from a parenting perspective, is unless you have interaction with those professions, you don't know what they do, right? I mean, I'm just now seeing an occupational therapist, for my hand and my wrist, and I think it just, anything that reduces that barrier of knowledge and understanding and fear or wonder or, oh, what good would they be to me? Or this is, because there are people in, tight social networks with a lot of distrust about a medical community or about, so-called professionals, right? And especially now in this era of, questioning science and, oh, that's just fake news and things like that. So I think it would be fabulous. It's fabulous that you bring in professionals. So what other types of specialists do you bring in?
Well, I can share that it's when I'm bringing them in, it's typically the ones that are already visiting our classes. So if they're visiting on behalf of someone, I'll offer up the opportunity to just guide us and to have a conversation with us. So if I have a speech pathologist or an OT or a PT, so it's the people it's our colleagues that are in the building that are already our early interventionists and our 3 to 5. So part B and C. So I'm not like going out into the community seeking these professionals. It's the ones that are coming to us and just opening that dialogue up further.
I haven't done this in 196, but in Edina, I developed a practice of inviting the cultural liaisons in for a class once a year. And that was really interesting learning for me to observe parents of color whom I had a relationship with, I thought, until the cultural liaisons visited, you know, so it was a 6 month relationship. The questions that they had and were comfortable asking of the cultural liaisons was a really humbling experience for me to realize, like, that's a different level of trust. It's a different kind of vulnerability and relationship. And I'm still the white lady representing the American public school system. So it was really good learning for me, as well as I think all of the parents in the room, whether they identified as parents of color or not, to understand that those people are a priority for the district, and that there are resources and supports in place for them. And that it's a different experience for parents who come into a school system with their own non-American or non-American public school system background themselves. So that was really interesting. I highly recommend doing that.
I know it's unusual, but it's really cool. Our new cultural liaison for Spanish speakers actually comes almost every single week to my parenting class, my ELL class. And she's just like part of the class. And having, number one, for me, having another English speaking adult as part of the room is super helpful. None of the people in my class are actually Spanish speakers, right? Because that's the Monday class. The Tuesday class, I've got Korean and Somali and Arabic, but just having her there as part of the class, as another support, as a person who's there for them, has been phenomenal. So I think that's a little unusual, but she, because it's a brand new position for her, really wanted to make sure she was connecting with the ELL families. So just being a part of the class has been instrumental for that. Okay, I know we only have like now less than 15 minutes left to go. So of course I'm going to bring up a totally new topic. Next week, I am teaching one of my favorite classes of the year to teach, which is Parents as Sexuality Educators. And in the past, I've had Family Tree Clinic come, and they are fantastic. But with COVID and then having classes at odd times, and it's just, I find it really kind of challenging to get guest speakers in. I'm just tackling it myself. That's what I did last year for the first time, and it went okay. So I am like, okay, I'm going to deal with this. And this week, my lessons were on the importance of listening to kids, and leading into having courageous conversations, and how do you talk about things that might make you feel uncomfortable, just kind of leading into that. And I'm mostly excited because I really do love this topic, and I'm worried about my Thursday night class, because there is a dad in this class, and there's this whole history that's interesting and challenging to navigate. And he said something just last night about, you know, I have some opinions that other people don't agree about, and because we're talking about how much do we share with our kids, how much do we want them to make their own decisions about things, and it came up from one of the potential, I had them come up with topics that might make them feel uncomfortable or might be hard to talk about with their kids, and religion and faith was one of them. And so that's where this came up. And then he was like, for instance, like, I know there's some gender stuff, but I think a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl, and I think I should be able to think that, you know. I'm like, okay, thank you for the heads up for next week. But I'm feeling a little apprehensive about wanting to feel as prepared as possible to keep the space as safe as possible for everyone, including one of the moms who's gay in the class, who's a 2-mom household, because I can sense that there could maybe be something hurtful from some direction coming up. And that's not what I want this class to be about. It's not about discussing beliefs so much as it is about reflecting on your own beliefs and how important it is to talk with your kids. That being said, like, when Family Tree Clinic has come out, one of the things they really kind of have made a point about with different speakers is one of the one of the things that can determine someone who becomes an abuser is how strongly they have gender roles in their own childhood. Like if their parents had really strict gender roles for them as a kid, that can become an indicator to becoming an abuser. I also happen to know that this man is an abuser. So because we've got this really challenging dynamic with he and the children's mom cannot be in the same place at the same time. Mom was the original person in the class and has shared the story. And this is the beginning to have visitation rights and stuff, is that he's coming to ECFE now. So I just, I'm feeling like there's a whole lot potentially going on next Thursday night. And I want to come in without apprehension. I want to come in feeling confident and calm and able to kind of help guide and navigate in a way that keeps everybody safe. And I'm wondering if anyone has any great tips or ideas.
I just started this week, Becca. And I always I often go back to my ground rules. And I was like, yo guys, we're going to talk about sexuality today. And I have a slideshow, just a real quick slideshow of the cartoon and some things that I share. But I say, we come to this topic with different values, but we have the same core, like, hopes for our children. And we want them to be safe, and we want them to feel good, and we don't want them to feel shame. And so just, like, we all come to this with a different set of values. So we're going to be respectful of that. And then before anyone can say jack squat about what they do or don't believe in, I say, many of you have, a family dynamics. I know some of our families, and I say our families in the program. So I make it like right here, right now. I say, in our program, we have same-sex families. In our program, we have families who have transgender siblings. In our program, we have families, so I said, our values are all different, but we come together to help ourselves and our kids navigate a really unique, diverse, and wonderful world. Like I kind of get a little schmaltzy about it, but I feel like it sets the tone, right? Like I don't know. Since I started doing that, I feel like those, like, well, a boy's a boy and a girl's a girl, right? You can whatever. But I sort of feel like this sort of just makes it real smooth to start us off. And then I say, and also if you don't really know how you feel about a lot of this, get a book. And then I bring out I have a big old stack of sexuality books that helps you. So anyway, that's just what I did this week. And they all went so well. It
has usually gone very well for me. It's just, this is kind of a unique group that I'm a little worried about. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Only other thing I would add is I put the healthychildren.org, the American Academy of Pediatrics link in there. I don't know the one that Nikki posted. I think it's probably very similar. It's a very like mainstream, maybe somewhat clinical approach. And I've done that when I've talked about sex and gender identity, gone to healthychildren.org, because it is it's what your pediatrician is going to tell you too. And I feel like if we can kind of close ranks with some of those other professionals who are going to be messaging things similarly, that actually is helpful to be like, hey, I'm not delivering anything, crazy here. Crazy. This is what helps kids be healthy. This is the same thing that your pediatrician would tell you. So I don't often hitch my wagons to doctors like that, but in the case of this topic, and race too, I think it's helpful.
Thank you. That is helpful.
I'll add that I also, when I talk about the topic, I refer to it as sexuality as it unfolds from birth, so that they realize, like, we are not talking about something that somebody just discovers at a certain age, or that they think is, we're talking about, what they gain from skin to skin contact when they're just born. And so I really appreciate the sheet that I linked, because we go back from day one and then talk about, so, okay, so now we're 2, or now we're 3, and now we're 4. And so to give it this perspective, that this is something we were all born with. I think it can kind of neutralize a little bit too. And then in the chat, I had also written that the whole sheet is centered around values. And so to help them realize that it's not, we do come to this, like Ellen's saying, from a different set of values, perhaps, but to recognize that our community has a set of shared values.
Well, and that's something that's pretty cool about Family Tree Clinic and their presentation. They really talk about having these kind of conversations as an opportunity to share your values with your child. So they're not trying to necessarily put their organization's values on you. They're trying to say, you need to be having these conversations with your children early and often. These are a great way to share your values. And so I've kind of piggybacked on that, but I like the also adding in what are our shared values. That's a good piece to add as well.
I also always acknowledge, like I say, for some of you, this might be really hard to talk about, because for some of you, you may have some trauma around this. And and I tell families almost every other year, for a while, like 3 years running, I had a parent come up to me and say, thank you for doing this topic. I wish I had known this stuff, or I wish my brother had known this, and, so I say, this is stuff that, we don't want to talk about. It's kind of like the insurance policy. It's like having fire insurance for your house. Like, you talk about it, you pay for it, you have it, but you really hope that you never need it. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge that this can be hard for some people to talk about. And I always say too, if you have nothing to add to this conversation and you're just here to listen, that's great. Like, I don't expect, if you just want to sit and absorb. And I have had very chatty parents get very quiet. So just really opening that door to just sit and absorb.
This could be a great sideways solution to having one parent that overshares or overtalks. You could drop a bomb and put a really tricky topic down, and then that might make them be quieter.
And not talking about it also transmits your values.
Right.
And
that's a key part of my presentation, is saying
They'll go to
nothing at
school.
all is absolutely teaching.
Yep.
It just might not be teaching what you want to be teaching.
And they're going to get it at school. And then I usually ask parents, I love to find out what did you learn and where from? Did you get it from a sibling? Did you get it on the school bus? Did you get it at school? Did you get it on the playground?
Did
and
you have the talk, sit down? Right. Like, that's totally a part of how we begin is with that.
And they're funny.
The second piece is writing down your own values. And it's like not necessarily needing to share it all, but what are your own values that you're hoping to pass on to your children? And so we'll do that. I like the idea though of starting with, like you said, Ellen, like kind of revisiting our expectations of how we're going to treat each other in the class to make sure everyone feels safe. Okay. Well, I'll be able to fill you in next week on how it went. We'll see.
In 2 minutes left, can I ask one quick question? I know I'm late. You may have already talked about this, but Susan, how did your NPEN thing go on Wednesday? I'm sorry, I had to miss it. Do you guys know what Susan did on Wednesday?
Oh, it was good. It was good. It was good. No, thanks. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. No, I did a little thing for NPEN, the National Parenting Education Network, on ECFE in Minnesota, and the incredible resilience of the parenting educators in adapting their programming for COVID. And yeah, it was good. Thank you. I don't know why I'm hesitating. Just, I think it was half the people who were there were from Minnesota, and names that I recognized. But they, I guess they do record it, and they share the slide sets and everything with anybody who registered. So there's another 30 or 40 people, I guess, who will get it. So, I think that the lessons from our state are evocative of the entire field. And that was the point that I was also trying to make about, that we cannot keep relying on adaptations and interest in equity and building relationships the shoulders of the teachers alone, and that it needs to go at a more of an administrative level, and that there were so often that the educators, anxiety was just heightened by, they were doing everything they could do, but the administration, probably through no fault of their own, just didn't have the resources to do more. And anyway, so, just always good to get some advocacy in on parenting education. And
Thank you for doing that. And so this might be a topic for like all of next Friday, but when you talk about that in a nationwide group, when you talk about ECFE, are there people who are like gobsmacked by ECFE still? I have a friend who's a legislator in the state of Oregon, and she and I were talking the summer before COVID about ECFE and how much I love it. Or she's like, oh my gosh, she's actually a pediatrician by trade. She's like, we got to get this in Oregon. And I'm like, yes, you do.
Yep.
So is there any, I mean, maybe that's a topic for another time, but I just think the program is so amazing, and I can't believe Minnesota is the only state that has it.
It is a topic, I think, for another time, but just that it is very common for me to present my research on parent learning or teaching or technology or whatever, because it's all related to ECFE, and then have people afterwards come up and they don't want to talk about the research, right? They're going, what is this ECFE program you have in your state? And which I'm always happy to talk about. But on the flip side of it, though, there are so many political structural barriers to making a program like ECFE happen in other states, that there is just not the political will, unfortunately. And whatever Jerry, what's his name, and the Betty Cooks and Glenn Palms did back 40 some years ago truly was magic for the state, because there, I have heard from other people like your friend Sarah, who are very interested, but they can't get it beyond the interest stage. And I will also say, and I'm sorry to get systemic on this, but it's also the challenge of doing evaluation of this program. And it's just this repetitive cycle where if there isn't an interest in putting the funding into showing the research and the evaluation of how ECFE works, it will remain a program that does not get the attention of the Triple P parenting program and the Incredible Years and ones like that are high intensity programs, but they're short term and they can measure change, and they can also target towards special populations of higher risk parents or parents with children on the where the money is. I mean, honestly, through my 40 years, money talks, right? And so that's where the direction of the research goes. There were years where all the research was with military families because the Department of Defense was putting money into it. Now it's on the autism spectrum, which is great, right? And so so if the funding's not there, the data can't be there. If the data can't be there, the politicians won't be behind it, because they need the evidence to go against all of the, but oftentimes conservatives who will say, you don't need to tell me how to, I don't want the government coming into my home and telling me how to be a parent, right? That's for those parents. That's for parents that, need it, but I don't need it because, so it is, so the fact that 40 some years ago that they could put something statewide through the school districts, get a frickin' teacher's license out of it, to offer a preventive program for all families of children 0 to 5 that was long-term, that the parents could keep coming back, universal access, low cost, is a miracle. So I'm happy to talk about it, Sarah. But I know that it is really, really a challenge. So, well, I have to dash, and I am really sorry, Sarah, you got my blood going now. So if you guys want to pick this up, thank you, Ellen, for whatever I said back then. What did I say? Yes. Oh, look at that.
Basically what you just said right now. It's
See?
on my
Here it is
wall.
10 years later.
See?
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Gosh, where did I write that? Oh,
It was in a chat in one of our classes. And I was like, dang, that's a good quote. And so,
look at you.
yeah.
It isn't recognized or valued. It isn't, which is why I'm always really happy to, talk about it. And I was happy to do the NPEN thing, mostly to be able to talk about ECFE and to lend what little bit I can do through my own research and evaluation about how ECFE works and how the relationship component is so meaningful, and how, we can be resilient and all of that. So
it's such a systemic problem, though, that I really do wonder if even if you had all of this evidence and research, if that would even matter anyway. I mean, because if you look at how many other problems with childhood we have in this country, because we refuse to do things like other countries who are getting it right, whether it's parental leave or whatever, so many things. It's like, we've got evidence. And
right. I mean, and also with universal childcare, right? You go to other countries and they're like, yeah, so I went back to work and then I just took my child to childcare. Just like that happened. Yeah. So between childcare and work family policies, yeah. And I would say more of the stuff I've been doing internationally just brings home that point even more severely. And the fact that, sorry, this is the last thing and I do have to go, but the fact that after all of these years, we are still dealing with a rotten public school system, right? And inequities and racism that, after all of, and women's issues, and now we're turning back abortion. So I totally agree, Becca. I mean, it's valuable, it's really necessary, but it's hard. So, all right, my love, I will see you all next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yuji, did you see the chat?